It was just the break of day, we were cruising in the bay, with Blue Billy in the sovereign in the van, when the French fleet bound for Brest from Belle Isle came heading west. 'Twas so, my lads, the saucy game began. Billy Blue, here's to you, Billy Blue, here's to you.
Nelson, Hannibal, Rommel. History celebrates the military commanders who dared and won. But wargamers often discover that the dice do not always follow the adage, fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, you got the bell curve. Well done.
Like the military commanders that they portray, players of historical miniature wargames must decide when it is time to take a chance and live with the consequences. Recently, we caught up with the Monadnock Historical Wargaming Association, where Adam was running a game of Black Seas based upon the historical naval action in the Bay of Biscay on the 17th of June, 1795, Cornwallis Retreat. On that day in history, Vice Admiral William Cornwallis was hunting French merchant ships when he was confronted and pursued by an overwhelming French force. The scenario began with 12 French ships of the line under Vice Admiral Louis Thomas Villeray de Joyeuse, played by Mark, with squadrons commanded by Peter, and Kelly, pursuing 5 ships of the line of the Royal Navy under Vice Admiral William Cornwallis, played by Arafon. William Cornwallis was a highly successful naval commander who, over the years, had earned the trust of his sailors, so much so that they gave him a nickname, Billy Blue, and immortalized him with a sea shanty.
Chance to fleck the evening sky, and still faster to impel the flying goal. Billy Blue, here's to you, Billy Blue, here's to you.
In Adam's scenario, the newly commissioned HMS Mars, under Captain Charles Cotton and her hundreds of crewmen, could not keep up with the rest of their squadron, and were being overhauled by the French. What to do? Arafon decided the Royal Navy's only chance was to turn and fight. He split his force, with the strongest ships, the Royal Sovereign and the Bellerophon, turning about downwind to attack the French before they could bring their numbers to bear. He wanted to turn HMS Brunswick in the opposite direction to rake Kelly's onrushing French ships. A rake is a historical tactic in which a broadside is fired perpendicularly into its target. This angle allows the cannonballs to tear through the entire length of the ship, causing additional damage. In Black Seas, each rake on a target's bow adds 1 point of damage to each hit scored, while a stern rake doubles the damage caused. Unfortunately for the Royal Navy, moving perpendicular to Kelly's French ships would require sailing directly into the wind, an impossible task for a square-rigged ship. In Black Seas, ships facing the wind must cease moving and anchor. The Brunswick was therefore forced to tack, zigzagging slowly at angles not directly into the wind, and this prevented any rakes. In response to Arafon's opening moves, Admiral Mark decided to turn his flagship downwind to fire a broadside at the Mars. This choice to turn forced Peter's formidable squadron to split up and also turn downwind to avoid a collision. The French ships turning downwind were now moving away from the Mars, but they were poised to engage the Royal Sovereign and the Bellerophon. Kelly decided it was time to take a chance and boldly steered his flagship into a gap in the British line. His change of course made it simple for the Triumph to rake the Redoutable's bow, which caused considerable damage and started a fire. The Brunswick then closed in and fired a close-range broadside that shook the Redoubtable.
Doubtable is pretty doubtable.
But the stalwart crew of the Redoubtable rallied,
Fire goes out.
extinguished the fire, and continued the fight. The Redoubtable's actions had not been reckless bravado. By drawing the attention of 2 Royal Navy ships, she allowed 3 ships of Kelly's squadron and 1 of Mark's ships to attack the Mars from 2 sides. A fire broke out on board, and soon afterwards, the Mars struck her colors, encouraging the French
We have already won. The champagnes are nice. We have English beef for dinner.
and dispiriting the British.
I need the clock to end this thing.
Arafon was indeed in a predicament. From his quarterdeck, the horizon was filled with oncoming French ships. Only 2 Royal Navy ships were even close, the Bellerophon and the Mars. And she wasn't going to be much help. The action now turned downwind as the Royal Sovereign and the Bellerophon raced Mark's and Peter's squadrons to get in front and rake their opponent's bow. Both sides employed Adam's house rule, cracking on.
I have a special rule I call cracking on. It allows a player to increase the speed of their ships at a penalty to their firing. So they can add 1 to 3 extra inches of movement, but they have to make a skill check. If they roll a 1, something bad happened up aloft. The sail split, some block and tackle fell on somebody. Any number of things can happen. So some damage is taken and a high critical occurs.
Superior seamanship and British luck won it for the Royal Navy when HMS Bellerophon raked Peter's flagship, the Formidable, inflicting terrible damage.
Everything hit, and a crit.
Okay.
But the French were undeterred. Sensing the Bellerophon could be taken, Peter closed in, grappled her, and French sailors and marines swarmed aboard. Elsewhere, the battle raged on as both sides traded powerful blows. But all eyes remained focused on the struggle between HMS Bellerophon and the Formidable. A French success here would give them a major victory.
This is where we will learn that British men don't cry.
Unlike those Australian guys.
By now, the melee had swung in favor of the Formidable.
Vive la France!
Vive la France!
So 4 points for you. Aha! 6 points for you. However,
Dice can be fickle friends, and eventually the courageous crew of HMS Bellerophon repelled the French boarders. The British could ill afford to celebrate. There were still plenty of French ships, and the Bellerophon could not resist another such attack. But then, a miracle! What happened next in both history and our game was based on a gamble taken by Cornwallis. Here's Ed Mayhew of the National Museum of the Royal Navy to explain it in depth.
Hi, I'm Ed Mayhew, Curator of Artefacts here at the National Museum of the Royal Navy. Vice Admiral Cornwallis was facing a French fleet of 30 ships, including 12 ships of the line. Cornwallis himself had 5 ships of the line and 2 frigates. As well as undertaking a fighting retreat, he was going to use every tool at his disposal to gain an advantage. To this end, he detached the frigate HMS Phaeton to undertake a ruse de guerre. HMS Phaeton, commanded by Captain Stupford, advanced several miles west of the squadron, and then began signalling back that they could see some sails in the distance, and then subsequently a whole fleet. This last signal, which was issued by let going the top gallant sheets and firing 2 guns, was not only obvious from a distance, it was clearly understood by the French. The Phaeton then continued to signal to the imaginary fleet in the distance and relayed the information to Cornwallis that the fleet was friendly. These signals were issued by a tabular method, which was a new one for the British, but it had been heavily based on the French system at the time, so again, they could interpret it easily. Finally, and this was more a behaviour of the ship indicator than anything else, the Phaeton shortened sail as if it was completely safe from harm. Surely something it wouldn't have done unless it felt safe. At this point in time, there was no indication that the ruse was working, and the action continued for several hours, although by the end of this period, the fire was slacking on both sides. Then, at 6 p.m, by sheer coincidence, some sail appeared on the horizon in the direction that the Phaeton had been signalling. At 6:10, the French stopped firing, and within half an hour of that, they'd given up the pursuit altogether. The identity of those mysterious vessels that appeared at 6 p.m. has never been fully revealed. They weren't British or French reinforcements, and it's likely that they were just some merchant vessels. But whatever they were, it was enough to convince the French commander to give up the pursuit. The decision for the French to withdraw may seem surprising, considering they had overwhelming superiority of numbers. But when you consider the wider context, it starts to make more sense. The French had already suffered 2 naval losses in the war, the first at Toulon, and then the second on the 1st of June 1794. The action with Cornwallis had already lasted a day, and it looked like it was going to go into a second. The ships that had been sighted at 6 p.m, although still in the distance, hadn't been identified, and they could be the British Channel Fleet, so hanging around in the area was a gamble for the French. Not only that, the British had shown that they were going to fight for it. If the French did carry on, they were going to take battle damage, and if they were to encounter the British fleet, that was a factor to consider. Whatever the deciding factor was, or whether it was a combination of all of them, the French withdrew.
And so our game ended. Just when things were looking bleak for Cornwallis and the Royal Navy, our referee Adam ruled that, as in history, the Phaeton's ruse had worked, and the French must break off and retreat. We examined the ship's records and determined that, by the narrowest of margins, the French had caused just enough damage to claim a minor victory. Or, in their words,
Grand victory, which we swept the seas of the British scoundrels.
Better to burn out than to fade away.
Vive la France. But it was also clear that Cornwallis had done well enough to live to fight another day and escape with his honor intact. Hey, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. And consider sharing it with those you want to introduce to historical miniature wargaming. Now stay tuned for a tribute to our players and some funny moments from our game.
The Admiral has his chair.
Cannonballs are addressed to whom it may concern.
That means a croissant, though.
I believe that I have to put a broadside into that.
Yes, except that's your own ship.
Yes. It's your own ship.
Yes. No.
Can I wipe that ship?
I appreciate.
Where do I drop off the blackmail cash?
It was just the break of day, we were cruising in the bay, with Blue Billy and the Sovereign in the van, when the French fleet bound for Brest from Belle came heading west. 'Twas so, my lads, the saucy game began. Billy Blue, here's to you, Billy Blue, here's to you. Washing decks was hardly done when we heard the warning gun, and we saw in black and clear against the sky 12 big ships of the line with the frigates 29 on easterly horizon drawing nigh. Billy Blue, here's to you, Billy Blue, here's to you. As she broke the line with how, so she's game to do it now, and repeat her first O June here in the seas, with the name for dauntless pluck and the Billy Ruffin's luck. I will fight as many Frenchmen as you please, But it wasn't merely bluff, for she saw the job was tough, and the signal promptly flew to go about, with the slowest ship in front, and his own to bear the brunt. So we headed back for England, guns run out. Billy Blue, here's to you, Billy Blue, here's to you.